Scott, we're on the 3rd Avenue Bridge. Like we were saying, all the downtown bridges are closed. The law enforcement officers who were guarding on that end were able to let us on for this live shot, though. You can see all those Linn County trucks. They're all filled with dirt. And just a few minutes ago, the Linn County workers are taking a break now. But if you see here, the Linn County workers have been putting these HESCO barriers in front of the Linn County courthouse and to protect the jail as well. This was the same group of people who were protecting the sheriff's office earlier yesterday. That was where we were late last night. They said they had two jobs, to protect the sheriff's office and then to protect the courthouse and the jail as well. So that's the dirt that those trucks are dropping down. And then on this side of me, you see those yellow school buses. There are more yellow school buses behind the jail as well. They are still taking prisoners who are in the Linn County jail right now out. Like we told you before, if you know anybody in there, the males are going to Anamosa. The females are planning to go to Washington County Jail, and that's where they will stay until they're able to come back onto the bridge here. But like we were saying, it almost feels like a ghost town downtown right now because the public is not allowed on all of these bridges that cross to and from, and there's so much work going on. The people are staying off of the streets that run up alongside the river as well. And so out here on the bridge, it's just all county workers and all law enforcement, not only keeping it secure and keeping it safe, but trying to make sure that the water doesn't get in here. One last point for you. At 24 feet, so roughly the crest, they're expecting to see some water maybe get onto the bridge. That's why the protection is so low, because at the projected crest right now, and even those HESCO barriers give you about 4 feet. At the projected crest, we only see water on the very surface of the bridge. That's why those barriers are so low right now. We're covering the corridor in Cedar Rapids. Now we'll send it back to you guys. Karen, we're just off the 3rd Avenue Bridge. You see some trucks coming over it right now, but for the most part, it is completely closed. Only official cars and vehicles are allowed on there. The jail is closed. That's where we were earlier today. You see all those HESCO barriers. The reason we're on this walkway and kind of bike trail, because this is where all the action is right now. This is one of the private companies that Cedar Rapids has contracted with to do some of the work, putting in some of the HESCO barriers and the flood protection. They've been putting in these HESCO barriers here for quite a while now. We can jump up over here. They just established these right here. They're starting to put sand in them using these big concrete pouring machines. And what they do is normally they put concrete down. Right now they're being repurposed for sand. And you can fill up these HESCO barriers extremely quickly. In the time that we've been sitting here, almost this entire first row has been filled up. We're covering the corridor in downtown Cedar Rapids. Kevin Barry, CBS 2 News.
Down the river, so many in Cedar Rapids are coming together to save as much property as possible. But there are some business owners who feel left out. CBS 2 News anchor Kevin Barry is live from Newbo with why the city says some tough decisions had to be made. Kevin?
Down here, we are on the flood barrier right now. This is the dry side, and this is the wet side. That's where tornadoes and some of their neighbors are in the southeast. While the city was building this big flood barrier, tornadoes was desperately trying to fend for themselves.
The city of Cedar Rapids exclude me and these other businesses blatantly to exclude us from protection from this water. They have put us in the river. They put us in the river. We're in the river.
Once we move downriver from 16th Avenue, there really isn't a good location to provide any flood control for a couple of reasons.
And those two reasons include having a hard surface to put it on. This roadway is hard concrete and asphalt. They say that's when the HESCO barriers are most effective, but also they need even land. And as you go south of here, it gets very uneven and goes very low. They say putting these flood barriers in low-lying areas wouldn't make them quite as effective. We're nearly protected to about 12 feet right here. They say this was an incredibly tough decision, but those are the reasons why the flood barrier is here and some of these businesses are on the wrong side of it. Covering the corridor in Cedar Rapids, Kevin Barry, CBS 2 News, 10 at 10. Yeah, Karen, we are just on the northern fringe of the New Bohemia District, just a little bit south of the 8th Avenue Bridge that cars can drive over. We're actually on the Cedar Valley Nature Trail, and this gives you an idea for how much water is here. We were here early this morning. We were on the other side of this late last night, and the water is completely up to the bottom of the 8th Avenue Rail Bridge. So now that's the bridge that takes rail cars from the east side of the river over the Cedar River into the ingredient plant. That water is completely up to the bottom of it. There is absolutely absolutely no space in between. And if we start to spin to the right here, we see just how high the water is, A, but also B, how fast it's moving. And this is a really good example of why you never ever mess with floodwaters like this. Look at how strong that current is. It could easily sweep somebody downriver. And then if you get in that kind of situation and you see over by the bridge, the water comes right up to the bottom of the bridge. It's starting to kind of rapids there and starting to foam up a little bit, and that's a bad situation. But as we keep walking along the Cedar Valley Nature Trail and head down this way, that's the 8th Avenue Rail Bridge. This is the 8th Avenue Bridge for cars. There's only about 40 yards here worth of dry land before another dip underneath here, and it goes underneath the water. Now, we were here early this morning for our morning show, CBS 2 this morning, and there are bollards on the other side. It says caution bollards ahead. They're about 3 feet tall, and they're to keep motor vehicles from coming onto the nature trail. They are completely underwater. When we were here early on today, about 6 o'clock in the morning, we were able to go up all the way to where that road sign is. I'm going to stay out of the water, but we were doing all of our shots from way up there. In just a few hours, the water's come all the way up here, and in the short amount of time that we've been here, the watermark has actually made its way all the way up to this point here. And so it's slowly shrinking this space that we have to hang out here to do our live shots. We're not going to be here for very much longer. We'll be sure to check in, but I would bet that we're going to be doing our next shots from up there looking down at this space, because the water is rising so fast, and it doesn't have all that far to go, but it's coming up pretty quickly, and pretty soon this could all be underwater, Scott and Karen.
Yeah, Kevin, I wanted to ask you to do us a favor. Can you show us, I mean, we have about 2 feet to go before we hit crest. So from where you are right now, can you give us an example of where that water is going to go or where it's going to be?
Sure. So let's go to where the water is right now. This is the very edge of this is kind of where the water is hanging out. So it may peak up to there, but this is where it is. So if we have 2 feet to go, and you think probably 2 feet up the side of my leg would maybe be to about here. So this is how high, see, so now I'm starting to get a little bit more wet. This is about how high this water is still going to go. We are just south of the flood wall, actually. So we're on the outside of the flood wall, and the good news that we can report right now is that the ground is bone dry underneath these two hoses. They are pumped up, or hooked up rather, to pumps on the other side of this wall that's into the storm drain system underground. So since this is bone dry, that means that there's not enough water to pump out from that storm drain system out of the Nubo area and onto this side. But this is a story we've been following for the past few days because it's gotten so much traction on social media. We see some of these businesses to the outside here. Kickstand is right here, and the flood wall is right over there. So let me spin around this way so that we can see exactly what we're looking at. We see some of these businesses that are right here. They're on the wrong side of it. And we spoke with the owner at Tornado's Grub and Pub down there, and he was extremely angry that the city built the flood wall where it did. He said his district isn't, or his building and some of these buildings aren't protected. He felt left out in the river is the way that he described it. So he had to build up flood barriers. He said that he's protected until 4 feet. Now, we went to the city and asked them why this flood wall was put up where it was and why these businesses were excluded. And so the city rather told us that the reason for that was that this is the last piece of ground where that is high enough and solid enough to put the flood barriers on. As you start going south that way, it gets lower. The topography is a lot more uneven. They say that putting up these 8 to 12 feet worth of protection doesn't work down there because when you put it in a 4-foot hole, it's more work to get the same amount of protection. Also, what's incredibly important is how solid this ground is. It's the last piece of flat, dry concrete and asphalt. They say these HESCO barriers work the best on there. Now, the owner of Tornado says he doesn't agree with that. He thinks they could have included them, but that's the reason the city gave for putting the flood wall where it is and leaving these folks on the outside. But like we saw before with that pump up there, the water is still way down the block. We can even take a look at how far the water is away still. It's still in its riverbanks over by the bridge. It's a full city block away, and it hasn't come up this far yet, and it doesn't have all that much farther to rise. Yeah, Kelly, we're right along the Cedar River, just across the street from the Linn County Jail, and we have a really good view right now of what's normally a bike trail that runs up and down the east side of the river. And as we look up, we can see the metal barricades that are used as flood protection. So the bike trail is part of your normal flood protection. Those metal barricades are supposed to keep the river on the other side. What we can see here is that those barricades are leaking just a little bit. The water is coming through those sandbags. So that means there is water on the other side of the planned flood protection, and that's being stopped partially by this HESCO barrier that we're standing on. But a good chunk of it is getting through the HESCO barrier, and you can see all the way down. This is normally a parking lot behind the Cedar Rapids Metro Economic Alliance and Dublin City Pub and River on the Bistro, or Bistro on the River rather. That parking lot is all water right now. The good news is this big pump that you can almost certainly hear through our microphones is keeping up with it. The city crews that we're talking to say that they are pumping the water out just as fast as it is coming in. So the water is not rising here. It really is just standing water all the way down. And same deal over at Smolikov's. They're pumping water out as well, but they don't seem to be terribly worried about it either. But really kind of an interesting view, and one that we don't normally see just on the other side of this barrier. The river running right through that bike trail, and unfortunately it is coming through some of those metal barriers that are meant to keep it over there, but it's being dealt with by this pump, and the pump is here beforehand. This is all planned out, so everything seemingly going according to plan, and some of the decisions that the city workers are making about where to pump and how much to pump is all to make sure that the integrity of this HESCO barrier remains intact, and so far so good along the east side here. Yeah, so far it looks pretty good uptown, but right now we're behind the African American Museum, and you can see behind me a whole lot of water is coming in from the river. And we were talking before about finding some standing water in different places. This is water with a current. This is the river overflowing its banks and becoming much larger than it normally is as you pass along. This is normally a bike trail and a little bit of a green space, but as we walk down this big flood barrier, you really have a really good idea for exactly how much protection the African American Museum has here. They have some sandbags on the door, and around the corner they have a lot of sandbags over at the front door. But then they have all this clay, and it's been kind of dropped here, and this is kind of what it looks like. It's hard, and it's more than just sand. It's hard to break apart, and it's all been compacted in here. You can see the tractor marks as well. So with heavy machinery just dumped here and then ironed out. So this is almost impossible to kind of get through, and it's incredibly sturdy. And then what they do is they take that plastic that we were talking about before, and they drape it on top and hold it down with sandbags. And so even with the water coming through the Cedar Valley Nature Trail right here under the bridge again, you can tell not only has it not reached this berm yet, and the water's only supposed to go up about a foot or so, but then it has all of this to come over too, and this is a good 3 or 4 foot drop before it gets on top of here and could get to the building. So while this is dangerously close, and it goes through a memorial that's there as well, probably dangerously close, too close to comfort for the folks at the African American Museum. The good thing is that they have a whole lot of protection standing in front here, and with the amount that we're expecting the water to continue to go up over the course of the next few days before it starts going down again, it doesn't seem like they'll get any water coming over the top and breaching this.
Kevin, you got some amazing pictures for us this morning. Kind of fill us in where you're at.
Yeah, Justin, we are actually on top of the sand barrier right now. So we're on top of 8 feet worth of HESCO barriers. This is the barrier that's along 16th Avenue Southeast. And the reason we're up here is because of all this water that has come in from the south, and it's come up right up to the doors of some of these businesses that are just south of the wall. Tornadoes is down there, Grub and Pub. They've set up their own protection to roughly about 4 feet, they said, while they were putting it together. Kickstand is all the way down there. They did some minimal sandbagging, but instead just kind of accepted the water through and opened up all their doors. This has been a controversial topic throughout this entire flood preparation process over the past few days, because the city decided to put this HESCO barrier right here along 16th Avenue, and this used to be a roadway that we would look at and tap on and talk about how it was hard concrete. Now it's roughly about 2 feet worth of water. The controversy comes in that the owner of Tornadoes said that he wanted the HESCO barrier to come in and include him. He thought that as a business downtown, they've been a business for a long time, they predate the 2008 flood, that they should have been included and they should have been protected. So we asked the city why they weren't. And the Public Works Director and then Mayor Ron Corbett also reiterated this in an interview on CBS 2 and Fox 28 as well. They said that this was the best strategic spot to put this flood protection because it's the last spot that has a hard concrete and flat surface so that it can be the most effective when they put the HESCO barrier down. They also said it's the most even ground and the highest point. Farther on to the south, it's not only lower, but also uneven topography. And so they said if they put the HESCO barrier all the way down there, they would have been putting it in like 4-foot holes, which would have made it much less effective and much harder to seal all the water out. So let's talk a little bit about that effectiveness. You see the water over on this side. It's about 2 or 3 feet tall. If you look at that bottom layer, there's like a little bit of a ledge there. That ledge is a solid 4 feet off the ground. So you see the water is probably 3 feet up. So now let's look on the other side. Oh, we don't want to knock too much sand off of here, but there is a little bit of water coming through. A lot of this water is coming up from the bottom, but you can see the grass and you can see the sidewalk there and things like that. The city's case would be, imagine how much worse it would be if they had this on uneven territory and it was being hit by a lot of this water. That water would be getting through much easier. And so they're able to hold off 3 foot of water compared to just a couple inches over on this side. And the city would say that makes their case. The owner of Tornadoes says that he's still now battling off and left to his own devices to battle off all that water that's bumping up against his building and his basically homemade flood protection. That he was here with a few friends and one of them happened to have a front end loader, so he was thankful for that, but he had to make that all himself and seal it up all his own as well. And he has a little bit of a message there for the city too. One more update though, one of the city crews we were chatting with on the way over said that just down there you see some heavy machinery doing some work, and earlier on in the night one of the employees at the DoubleTree Hotel uptown was saying that all of a sudden he saw a lot of sandbags leaving the First Avenue area and coming down here. It seems to be that they had a break in the wall down there, and that city worker was telling us that he was a part of the crew who was fixing it. They said that he said at one point if they were going to lose it, quote unquote, so have a catastrophic break in the wall, that would have been where it was. He says though with a lot of emergency hard work, they were able to plug that hole and stop it. And so that's the residual of that effort down there, all that heavy machinery.
Out there doing a fantastic job on little to no sleep, Kevin.
Hi there, Justin. We are just south of the New Bohemia District, just behind the National and the new spot where Bohemia is. And we're taking a look at where all that water has been coming up through the storm drains. And we have a really good look at the new mound that's being built. It's hard clay that's being compacted in by heavy machinery. And there's that little drain on top, the plug they call it. It goes right at the very top. And what they're trying to do is tamp down where there was a break this morning. This is where all this water was rushing up, and the mayor just told us about how one of the city's 3 weaknesses when it comes to flood protection, when it comes to flooding, is the fact that water comes up through the ground. So even if the water doesn't come over the top of the barriers or break through the barriers that line 16th Avenue, it can still come up through the water and essentially almost burrow underneath those barriers. That's exactly what happened here. And the city workers that we've been talking to say it was essentially a full-on emergency today. And the mayor says that was because if you don't get to it fast enough and there's too much water, then you can't get the people and the machinery in to fix it. And then it runs crazy and you can't stop it then after that. What they were able to do though is even though there's a lot of water here, they were able to tamp it down fast enough and keep it from spreading too far. So now the only thing that's actually flooded is this area right here, a little bit up 16th Avenue. And for the most part, just the rest of this grassy area, which was just a little bit of a roadway, but nothing more than that. It didn't hit the geometric building, which you notice is built recently and built up on a hill there, so they have a little bit extra protection. It barely got to the front door of Nubo and certainly didn't get inside. It's still across the street. And it didn't get to the new National Building, which is the old Chrome Horse building, which is being renovated right now. So good news for the Nubo district on this side of the wall.